In this module, we're going to look at how you make sure that your descriptions are accurate. So, just to set the scene for the consumer protection regulations, these are European regulations. They're what's called new approach regulations, and so they're not very specific, they're quite general, and so it's down to interpretation. But remember, these regulations mean you commit offences if you give a misleading or false description about a property. And they're strict liability offences, which means that it doesn't matter why you got it wrong, it doesn't matter whether you intended to get it wrong, it doesn't matter whether you were provided with wrong information. If you give a false or misleading description, that will be an offence, and that's all trading standards officers have to prove. You do have an option of a due diligence defence, and we're going to talk about that in a later module. But in many respects, every description that you provide must be accurate. If it's false or misleading, it's a criminal offence. You can be prosecuted by trading standards officers through the courts if you give a false or misleading description, or it might go to the property ombudsman, and the property ombudsman could issue a penalty against you, so you have to pay compensation to a potential buyer or a buyer. So, what generally are offences? Well, obviously, if you make a claim about a property that isn't true, that's going to be an offence. If you advertise memberships of organisations and you don't have those memberships, then that's an offence. So if you say you're a member of the Property Ombudsman Scheme, or you're a member of RICS, or you're a member of any other professional organisation and you're not, that's an offence. If you give misleading information about your business on a website, that can be seen as an offence. There are prosecutions that have been taken against agents for giving wrong information on websites. If you give any price reduction claims about a property, then that can be an offence. Flyboarding, we talk about that in another course, but again, that's an offence. If you exaggerate your sales record or your position in the market, then that's again an offence. If you pass on materially inaccurate information about market information, then you commit an offence. So you have to be on the ball with all these things. You have to be professionally diligent. If you're not professionally diligent, mistakes will happen and you will commit offences. So let's look at misdescriptions. Let's look at, first of all, the risk areas that you have. So, hey, brochures, you put information in brochures, you put information on window displays, adverts in newspapers, magazines, websites, correspondence, property portals, sales memorandums, even the spoken word. These are all situations where you can give descriptions about properties that potentially could be misleading. There is also photographs, but we'll deal with photographs in a later session. What causes misdescriptions? Well, in my experience of 20 years working with agents, it's lack of professionalism. If you don't act in a professional way and with professional diligence throughout the whole process, from the start of the instructions all the way through to the ultimate sale taking place, then potentially you'll get things wrong and you will commit an offence. You will give a false description. So make sure you are professional throughout. So always be professional. Make sure you're asking questions of your client in relation to the property so that you're well aware of the situations. But make sure you're checking things as well. Don't just rely on the answers that you get from your clients. Make sure that you're asking questions and verifying the information. So that might mean a physical check. You would always measure the dimensions of a room before you quoted measurements. You would always look for receipts or guarantees if you were quoting information about perhaps loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, those sorts of things. You would use your local expertise if you're talking about whether the property is a listed building or it's in a conservation area, or you're quoting the location of amenities in that area, so the proximity of schools, shopping centres, those sorts of things. Or you might obtain some professional confirmation to verify situations. So you might use the land registry to verify the tenure of the property. You might use a local authority's website to confirm the council tax bands or whether planning permission for anything around the property has been applied for. So make sure you're checking everything. What problems do agents have in this area? Room sizes tend to be a big issue because agents don't always measure. Make sure you always measure. Land and garden sizes, make sure you always measure again. Do not accept information from your client when they say it's approximately half an acre. They might exaggerate, they might not know, they might have guessed. You have to be sure. Try using ProMap. ProMap will give you an accurate measurement of the site and will give you a due diligence defence. When you're making claims about double glazing, make sure you're very clear. Is it fully double glazed? Check the windows. Is it partially double glazed? Is it mainly double glazed? You have to be sure about those statements, so check. Service charges can be a problem. So make sure when you're quoting any service charges, you see something that confirms how much they are. That might be a bank statement from your client showing how much they pay every month. Make sure you're also quoting a date for those service charges, because service charges will increase dependent on situations, and they might increase or decrease every quarter, every 6 months, or annually. So dates are important. The tenure of the property, is it freehold or is it leasehold? Important information for a buyer. So make sure you're checking. Lots of agents just ask the seller, ask the client, what's the tenure? And they will then produce information based on what they're told. They take big risks. Don't do that. Go onto the Land Registry's website. You can conduct a property search there to find the property that you're selling. Once you find the property you're selling, it will tell you what the tenure is. It's free of charge, and so it's well worthwhile using that. Parking spaces can be an issue, so make sure you're very clear in your details what the parking situation is. Is it allocated parking? Is it communal parking? Will they have to pay extra for a parking space? Is it separate parking? Make sure you're clear. Off-road parking, there's no off-road parking if there's no dropped curb. So make sure you're checking for a dropped curb. If there isn't one, then to say it's got off-road parking potentially is going to be a problem for you. Any conversion to the property, any extensions, any improvements, building regulations might be required. Planning permission might be required. So make sure you're checking these things before you make those descriptions.